Good afternoon or evening, and welcome. Kensington Senior Living has 8 unique communities, 5 located in Virginia, Maryland, and New York, and 3 sister communities located in California. Kensington is truly privileged to support care partners and professionals from coast to coast. Kensington focuses on relationship-based care, care built on the foundation of our promise to love and care for your family as we do our own. It is programs such as the one you are attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiver journey to hear from expert professionals on keeping us current on treatment and conditions that affect seniors and their families. I was first introduced to Kensington 10 years ago as my father was a resident for over 7 years. Everyone that registered for today's webinar will receive a copy to share with friends and family. Please also know to utilize the Q&A function to submit questions for our panel. Today is for you. Please ask questions, and we do have your questions that were submitted at registration that we will get to after the presentation. Please join me in welcoming Melissa Long, Monica Moore, and our special guest today, Dr. Kim. These women's knowledge and passion continue to impress me. Thank you for joining us, and please share a few words about yourself with the audience. And Monica, can I start with you?
Of course. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Susan, thank you very much for having me, and thank you to Kensington, as always, for allowing me to be a part of these presentations. I work at UCLA at the Alzheimer's Research Center and have the great honor of being able to work with Dr. Kim, where the Easton Center at UCLA, we're a comprehensive care center focusing on research and clinical care and clinical trials, as well as caregiver support, which is really what I focus on and how I'm able to support our families who are going through Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia. So it's such a pleasure to be here. Always grateful for this. Thank you, Susan.
I have to tell the audience that I first met Monica in 2017, a long, long time ago.
Wow.
And I met Monica and we did some events pre-COVID, in-person events. And then COVID hit, and Monica and I think pioneered the educational series with Zoom. So I hope you bought stock in Zoom.
Should have. I missed out on my opportunity back then. It was gonna be 2 weeks that we needed Zoom. That was it. It was gonna be
Yeah,
over and done within 2 weeks, right? Come on.
and we're still doing it. So there you go. Melissa Long, Melissa's on the East Coast, and I've known Melissa for about the same amount of time, and all these hearts are just gold in the Alzheimer's community. But go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, my name's Melissa Long, and I own Recreational Therapy Cubed. I've been a recreational therapist for almost 25 years. I'm also a dementia practitioner, and so I do caregiver education, both for professionals and families, doing one-on-one therapy, providing support groups, and doing certification classes so that more of our caregivers out there can have a better understanding of how to engage with our loved ones as they go through this journey so that they can have a calm and high quality life as they go through this. So,
And they say
thank you
it
for having
takes
me.
a village. And after my father challenged with Alzheimer's and my mother with Parkinson's, I can tell you it takes a village, but it also takes these wonderful experts to help guide us in this unpredictable journey. And our special guest today, Dr. Marie Kim with UCLA.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Susan, for the invite. I'm Dr. Kim. My first name is Marie. I'm one of the behavioral neurologists here at UCLA, and I have the honor of working with Monica and kind of following along and being invited to these kinds of outreach events. At UCLA, I sort of split my time 50-50. Half of it is really seeing patients in the memory clinic, answering questions about cognition or behavioral changes, and the other half is working with our Kagan Clinical Trials program, which really focuses on Alzheimer's disease and related dementia trials. So I'm happy to answer any and all questions that any of the audience may have. And in terms of the presentation, I was highly discouraged from doing a long or exhaustive type of presentation. So it's really focusing on just a few highlights, and it's really been tailored to some of the submitted questions from registration so that we really are focusing our time and energy answering the questions and the topics that are of most interest here for the audience.
And let me remind you, the audience, you continue to grow. I'm looking at my screen, but this is for you. And so now's the time. You have these experts that can really answer questions from a clinical standpoint, from a behavioral neurologist standpoint. Dr. Kim does the trials and manages that, but also our caregiver expert. So I encourage you to ask questions. And I want to remind everybody, Dr. Kim will begin in a minute, that you will receive a copy of this presentation. So really enjoy yourself and just pretend we're in your living room. Ask questions through the Q&A. And Monica, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking, so one of the aspects of my job is that I manage 5 caregiver support groups, or I manage 9, I facilitate 5. So I hear a lot from families, and I work with, Dr. Kim and our other neurologists in supporting their families. And I'm so excited about this today because there's so many questions about what's happening, what's new, what are the possibilities of what's next. And, I've been in this field for over 20 years, and we keep hearing, oh, there's going to be a cure in 3 to 5 years. Oh, we're going to have something in 3 to 5 years. But as I say, I'm like 20 years later, people are still saying 3 to 5 years. So, but I really feel that right now, and what we've seen in the past few years with the FDA approval of the 2 infusion medications is really this opportunity that we're changing the course. Like this is actually shifting here as opposed to where it's been just sort of moving in place for many years. So I'm really excited, and I'm grateful that we have this audience and that all of you are here today to listen and to be able to participate in this.
Melissa?
I have lots of families that I engage with, and I always get the question is when is the right time to start it? When is it appropriate? Is it more work than it is going to help them? And so us be able to have a conversation this evening and talk about that, where you hear that, kind of want those amyloids to be loose on your brain, kind of like a fresh snow, though I know people out in the West don't know what that is, but over here in the East Coast, we understand that, so that it can be picked off by the medicine, right? And be taken away, where if you're in the later stages, it's a lot harder to do because it's like hard ice. And so being able to share those things with people so they can have a better understanding and, figuring out which one works better. One's every 2 weeks, one's every 4, which one do you pick? And, what changes are coming with those. There is a lot of hope, and I've seen people who have done well on this. And I had a girlfriend who has a husband with early onset, and he's been on it almost 6 months, and he said, my brain doesn't feel foggy anymore.
Oh,
And it was so nice to hear him say that and know that it was working. And so, there is hope out there. Everyone's going to react differently. His experience isn't going to be everyone's, but it was a good sign that we were seeing progress. So I'm excited to learn more from Dr. Kim and see where we're going from here.
and you know what? A question just came in, and I'm going to kind of kick it off with the question because this is a two-part question. I don't know your name because you're anonymous, but two-part question. One is kind of for Dr. Kim, and one is for Monica and Melissa. And it's two-part. His father moved to memory care. Is it too late for him to participate in clinical trials? That's part A for Dr. Kim. And he's very encouraged with the research and how encouraging it is. But the part 2 of this is he was talking to his mother. His father moved into memory care. His mother is there all the time visiting him. She said, I think a lot of people that are spouses visiting their loved ones feel the same way I feel. Can we do some type of a group or have some type of a dialogue within ourselves? And maybe Monica and Melissa can offer some suggestions or, maybe some ideas about how you could start your own group and maybe have someone come moderate that. So I'll start with Dr. Kim. Is it too late, and when would it be too late, I guess is the question.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I guess I would say that it's not really the nature of being in a memory care facility. That's not exclusionary by any means. What we really go by in terms of clinical trial eligibility, and this was kind of actually part of the registration question as well, is there are specific inclusion-exclusion criteria for various studies, and most of the trials are going to be on Alzheimer's because that is the most common cause
Mhm.
of dementia. 60 to 80% are going to be Alzheimer's. And then most of them are going to focus on the early stages. So that would be the mild cognitive impairment stage where all the function is still retained, or the mild dementia stage where there's some cognitive decline and it is now severe enough that it is causing a loss of function in something that that individual was able to do prior to any of the symptom onset. So it's not that it's too late, but it's about finding the right trial. So most of the trials, as I said, is going to be Alzheimer's, and it's going to be in the milder stages. That's where you'll find the bulk of the trials. So if your father is in more of the moderate stages, or in maybe in the severe stage, or if if the etiology is different, if it's not due to Alzheimer's, maybe it's vascular dementia, or maybe it's mixed. The most common dementia is actually mixed, Alzheimer's and vascular, or is it something like frontotemporal dementia? It's going to decrease substantially the number of trials that are available for those relatively rarer kinds of neurodegenerative dementias, even though they are still quite common. It's just a little bit overshadowed by the Alzheimer's. So if you kind of know the stage, if you know the underlying etiology, there will probably be a trial available. It's going to be a harder find if it's not in the mild Alzheimer's. But if that is something that's of interest to you and your father, and the main thing that is needed is a study partner. It's a dyad. Because of the nature of the symptoms, the participant, him or herself, cannot really abide by all the protocols and all of the research pieces. So there just needs to be a study partner, and that's required for any clinical trial. So that would be really the big part. And I'll give you some more information in the presentation of really how to find some trials in your area.
Which
And
is great. So that's where you're going to get a copy of the presentation. So you will get all that information you just requested. What do you
but
guys think
also,
about a support group, girls?
well, I was going to say that, but also I think the other piece too is, we talk a lot about clinical trials, but there are still lots of research studies that where, let's say, a person who has maybe more moderate dementia, who may not be appropriate for a clinical trial per se, they might be appropriate for a research study. And again, that's why I always say is like all of our centers, all research institutions have a wide variety of research. So, like big umbrella research, and clinical trials is one piece of it. But like I said, we have somewhere we're talking to family caregivers and we want to know what a caregiver is experiencing. We want to know, so there's so many different things. And some of the trials too, like recently at UCLA, we had a research, a study about a medication that would help with agitation or behavioral issues. So again, we're not always just focused on delay of the disease. There's lots of different things. So anyone here, if you're here today, I say, find your local research institution since we are across the country, and have that dialogue because that's what it's about. And even if you aren't eligible for something today, maybe in 3 months a new study is going to come about. And then
Mm,
that's why if you call UCLA and you talk to us, we say, well, right now you don't meet criteria, but then in 3 months, once something comes about that you might meet criteria for, we now have permission to call you and to say, Susan, we have something that we think will work for you. We'd like for you to participate. So don't be discouraged just because it's a one time. No, we didn't have anything today. We're ever evolving, right? Dr. Kim, like
Yes,
the trials department, it is changing. There are things that are moving and grooving all the time. So
yes, it's very
making sure,
dynamic.
yeah, very dynamic. So don't take a no today, meaning you're never going to be eligible for a trial or your loved one. So keep that in mind too. It's very fluid. Yeah, Melissa, do you want to address the second question, the second part of that question?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to yours as well. Anyone can sign up with NIH for their research newsletter, and it tells you all the research that's happening that you might be eligible for to be a part of. And so, like Monica said, it may not be medication based, but they're doing research studies on occupational therapy with people with dementia, when I was in college, I was a part of studies on animal-assisted therapy. And I did a research study with the nutritionist where we used extra large Reese cups to help people maintain their weight that were losing weight. There's so many different things out there that there's possibilities for anything. And I think anywhere that we can all can contribute is only going to help us, whether it's with quality of life or improvement of the disease. So, um, and then to go to that second question, so I'm trying to find it on here to see
Oh,
exactly what it
just
was. I
It's
apologize.
talking
really
more about like
about
how can you
support
create,
groups.
yeah, like how can you, so if any of you, again, like finding community, I think, this
Mhm.
disease, as all of you
Yeah,
know,
so there's
is very isolating. And if you are living, if you're a
yeah,
caregiver, you're feeling isolated. So even if your loved one's in a
yeah,
community, other people there, their partners, their spouses, their families, they're isolated too.
yeah,
So say, hi,
yeah,
my name's Monica, this is my dad, and
yeah.
start creating that community or talk to the actual facility themselves to see if you can do something on,
Yeah,
there.
I've had caregivers do a couple different things. Some have started a chat group on their phone with ones that get along with each other at communities. I've had some where they do their own little happy hour in the neighborhoods, and they sit and talk to each other, and it's self-run. I've also had people where they just don't like group settings, and they find one person, it becomes their walking buddy, and they'll walk around and talk to them and have a one-on-one. There's lots of options virtually to do support groups. I'm actually getting ready to start a new one with the Lewy Body Association, and I had just had someone sign up from Canada. So, we have people from all over that can join as long as it fits with when you're awake. Please don't do it at 2 in the morning because that won't be productive for you. You need your sleep. But there's also the support boards on Facebook. You have the AARP caregiver one, and you have ones for Lewy body and FTD and Alzheimer's, and there's some that are just local to your area that are on Facebook, but there's some that are international as well. Talking to another caregiver that's going through things is so helpful, and I learned so much from the caregivers. I'm a caregiver at home myself, and I learned one of the greatest ones I learned. A gentleman, his wife has FTD, and she wasn't eating and he was trying to figure out how to get her to eat. And he started playing jingles from food commercials from the 80s and 90s, and she started eating again. And I was like, that is so ingenious. Like, what a great idea. And so you learn these great things from your peers who are going through this. They're boots on the ground just like you. And it's also a safe space for you to go, you know what? This really sucks. And I don't like this. And those people can commiserate with you on that, which is so important as well.
Okay, well, let's get to Dr. Kim, and I promise to the audience that's submitting questions, we'll get to those at the conclusion of this. But at Kensington, every day at 4 o'clock, they have happy hour with live music, so you could meet there. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Dr. Kim.
Excellent. So yeah, this will be quick and hopefully integrate some of the questions that were submitted during the registration. So I'll just get into some of the highlights. And let me just try to, minimize this because it's covering part of my screen. But we're going to go over some of the anti-amyloid therapy just because there were a lot of questions about that. And what are the next steps? Where is it going? And how are we going to expand some of the interventions? And mainly, I am focusing on cognition, but as Monica pointed out, the interventions are not just all pharmacotherapy, and it's not all for cognition, it's for many other things, and there are some trials even for the caregiver. And so we don't want to become too insular. I'm just focusing on that because many patients are kind of wanting to come in for delaying of the disease or for improving some of the cognitive aspects. We'll just touch one slide on the plasma biomarkers, and then there were a few questions really looking at supplements, alternative treatments, lithium, things like that. So we're going to touch on that as well, and then kind of lead in to some of the more specific questions. Oops, I think I might have to use the arrow button. There we go. So just to get on the same page in terms of anti-amyloid therapy, Alzheimer's biologically is defined by the presence of aggregated amyloid plaques and tau protein tangles. And so back in the day, we didn't really have a way to diagnose Alzheimer's until someone was already deceased. And so it's actually a neuropathological diagnosis, and therefore the biological definition of Alzheimer's is not really a specific cognitive profile, although that is what we use when someone is alive. what it really is defined by is the presence of amyloid and tau. And basically, you can see that it's an amyloid precursor protein. There's kind of a miscleaving that creates sort of a stickier form of the protein that continues to kind of snowball into now like a bigger plaque. And that can disrupt some of the circuits. It can kind of lead to other microenvironmental changes that is thought to kind of lead to some of the cognitive symptoms, although I have to say it's very complex. It would be a gross oversimplification to just say it's one thing. It's really many, many paths that can lead to neurodegeneration. But the anti-amyloid therapy is going after the amyloid plaque, and it is an antibody. It's given as an infusion, and it's basically targeting and tagging that protein for removal. And both lecanemab and donanemab are kind of at this later stage when it's kind of growing bigger into more of its fibril or plaque form, and both are very successful at removing amyloid to undetectable levels when we measure it by things like amyloid PET or even plasma biomarkers that kind of follow along with the amyloid burden as measured by the amyloid PET. And I wasn't going to go over all of the nitty-gritty details. There are many other kind of presentations that we've done on that, but I would invite everyone to go to this autumn 2024 newsletter. We did write it basically when donanemab was approved. So in 2023, lecanemab was approved, and then almost exactly a year later, donanemab was approved. And we were getting a lot of questions about, first of all, the first fork in the road is, should I even do this? Am I eligible? Is this right for me? And then if I decide I want to do it and I am eligible, which one may be better? And there are some nuanced differences in it. And basically, these were the 10 frequently asked questions. And it really does have enough information that anyone who is really considering anti-amyloid therapy would be able to at least find out if they're leaning one way or another. So it's pretty comprehensive. And I do recommend, it's just on the website, which is down here. And Monica also can send all of the specific websites that are on this presentation separately as well. So no need to rush to it or try to take a picture. All of that will be sent to you, and it's all just freely available online, like no passwords or anything are necessary. And then another question was like, am I a candidate? And it kind of goes back to the original question that Susan posed from the Q&A. It really is MCI or mild dementia, and it's due to Alzheimer's. And it really does have to be that the majority of the cognitive symptoms are stemming from Alzheimer's pathology. As you know, many, many things, obstructive sleep apnea, a lot of a huge vascular disease burden, depression, a lot of these things can actually disrupt cognitive efficiency. And so for something that is so kind of gassy and abstract, we do want to make sure that the majority of those cognitive symptoms are really coming from Alzheimer's disease, since the anti-amyloid therapy isn't really going to address any of the cognitive symptoms that are stemming from Alzheimer's pathology. And really, you just need an MRI brain that's within 1 year, because we want to kind of have a recent baseline, and that's due to some of the potential side effects. And we do monitoring MRI, so we don't want an MRI from like 10 years ago and comparing with that. We want something that's a little bit more recent, so we can really see if there is maybe a side effect or other things that are happening when you're on the therapy. You must have biological proof that you have amyloid, since that's all the drug targets. If you don't have amyloid, there's absolutely no indication to be on this drug. And by definition, we would not call your disease or the etiology of the cognitive symptoms stemming from Alzheimer's, just because you do need amyloid and tau for that. And that can be done through cerebrospinal fluid testing or amyloid PET scan. And then we need a little bit of genetic testing, specifically apolipoprotein E. And that's also due to risk stratification on the anti-amyloid therapy. And then Medicare basically stated that no one can be on anticoagulation, since being on the drug can have some bleeding side effects. And then, of course, being on a drug that thins your blood will also increase that risk. And then together, it's just the risk would be too high. And so it's not recommended. And so any person who's thinking about anti-amyloid therapy cannot be on something like an anticoagulation drug. So what are the next steps? It's actually been about 3 years now since lecanemab has been approved, so it's not even like super new anymore. And there are a lot of working groups that are looking at what to do with the anti-amyloid therapy. And so you can either double down on the amyloid. And so I showed kind of on that picture that lecanemab and donanemab are kind of in the later stages when it's like kind of bunched up and a bit bigger, but some people are saying maybe we can go even earlier and really stop new ones from forming, because once you stop the anti-amyloid therapy, it will, reaccumulate. So that's one of the combinations, or it can be amyloid and now another tau targeting agent. So you're really going after both of those proteins, and tau is an neuronal kind of protein, and that's considered to really follow the cognitive symptoms a little bit better than amyloid, which is extracellular. Or it can be broader pathways. So you can hit one of the core proteins, so anti-amyloid therapy, but then there are kind of more upstream pathways that can target neurodegeneration in general, or inflammatory targets, which are considered to be like a couple of steps before that deposition of protein. And so that's a particular combination that can happen. Or it's like what I mentioned, like the most common dementia is actually mixed dementia of Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. And so can we actually hit it so that we have a specific tailored therapy for mixed dementia, someone who has Alzheimer's and vascular, or Alzheimer's and Lewy body. And then there's other Alzheimer's mimics that can be caused by other proteins, like a TAR DNA binding protein, which is that TDP43. So this is kind of the next frontier of anti-amyloid therapy. It's the combination, but then there's a whole nother camp of just other mechanisms that exist on its own, and you certainly don't have to combine it with anti-amyloid therapy. All right, so plasma biomarkers. Really, I'm not even going to put anything specific about like p-tau or A beta 42 over 40, anything like that. The one that is the most broadly, I think, when people are talking about like the plasma biomarker, it is p-tau 217. So I think what's important to know about the plasma biomarkers, it was to allow more patients to get more information about their Alzheimer's risk, like outside of the bottleneck of getting in to see like a super specialist. And I think that people do have a harder time really giving a big diagnosis like that. And it takes a long time to do our cognitive exam. And then there's sort of training and extra interpretation that's involved with that. And again, being able to really measure cognition and function, they're really abstract kind of things. And so this was to kind of make it a little bit more quantitative and make it a bit more concrete. But what I would say is sometimes when you order a lot of tests, but you don't still have that familiarity about the disease and all the things that were kind of stopping you from really diagnosing things without the biomarkers, you'll still have a problem when you have these additional tests, because they still require interpretation. You need to take it into context, and every neurodiagnostic test has error. So there is no test that is 100% sensitive and 100% specific. They all have error. And so you want to really take many different pieces and put it together. That would be the best. So you have the cognitive profile, you have some neuroimaging, and then you have maybe some plasma biomarkers, and then you have the whole history, the trajectory, you have the context of that person. Did you have like maybe some kind of psychiatric illnesses before? Do you have ADD, things like that, to really kind of now get more of a global clinical impression. And so the one thing that I would really warn against is not to try and define everything just by the neurodiagnostic test. It is something that is nuanced, it's complex, people are complex, and so we don't want to oversimplify things, but part of it was to make things a little bit more simplified and to be more accessible, and so that is definitely the benefit, but we want to always remember what are the limitations of the tests that we are rolling out there, because some of the tests are going to be discordant, and then people have more distress, and it's actually caused more confusion to get more of these neurodiagnostic tests. So just want to practice a little bit of restraint with these as well. And then for supplements and treatments, I get this question a lot, just because supplements, they're so accessible. You can just go and buy them, and wouldn't that be great if this could really move the needle? And mainly, it's not to poo-poo it or say like absolutely that's it's garbage, it's not going to do anything. It's more that we don't have enough evidence to formally recommend it in the clinical setting. It's very different from your friend saying, hey, I tried this, it's really great, you should try it too. When I recommend something, just by the very nature of our relationship, it is coming from a medical provider in a clinical setting. We really need to make sure that everything that we tell patients, it is backed by some level of evidence. And we need to make sure that we're not just saying stuff to make you feel good and and just kind of saying a bunch of things that really don't have a lot of strict, high quality evidence to make that worth your effort. And we do have to be careful what we tell people because people will do what we say. So there's a responsibility from our end not to just say a bunch of things. And that's kind of where we are a little bit less vocal about recommending very specific supplements. Some of the issues with it are that it's not actually regulated by the FDA. Any manufacturer can just kind of drum it up and make it, and they can just sell it to you. And so overall, the market's very large. There's no need for rigorous documentation, and you'll see that what they promise is very vague. It's just brain boosting, better cognition, memory blast. Like they kind of have some more of these. It sounds really good, but it's like when you make a goal for yourself, it's like, I plan to be better next year. And it's like, maybe we need something like a little bit more step 1, 2, 3, a little bit more concrete and actionable instead of just these descriptions that are kind of even hard to measure. And there's not really any encouragement or reason for the manufacturers to do any rigorous scientific kind of testing, because if anything, it's probably going to decrease the appeal of their product. And so kind of less information with good marketing, a nice bottle, it's probably better for them to kind of keep it less informative. And it's not that it's absolutely dangerous. Some supplements, it's not that they're dangerous, but you do have to exercise a bit of caution, but it's that people really are spending some money. And on average, adults that are over 50 are going to spend about 50 to $100 a month. And so for us, it's really that if you're going to spend $50 to $100 a month on something that doesn't have any actual evidence behind it, would it be better maybe to use that money and redirect it to something that does actually have evidence? All the interventional lifestyle things, going and exercising, the MIND diet, which is the Mediterranean Dash intervention for neurodegenerative delay kind of diet, social kind of engagement, cognitive engagement. Can you just redirect that money to like join a gym or to do something else that really does have that proof? Maybe that would be kind of a better use. So in terms of the most evidence, I would say it's for omega-3 fatty acid, but it's still basically recommended to consume that through food as opposed to a supplement. And a lot of the supplements that are kind of touted to be helpful, they're actually extracted from the MIND diet. Those are the things that are in kind of the Mediterranean and DASH diet. And so they're trying to kind of simplify and extract just like the core pieces. But overall, it's still just recommended to do the diet and to get your nutrition from the food. And basically on the right, going into it kind of dovetails into the question of like, is there a way to distinguish maybe some evidence-based Alzheimer's treatments or supplements versus just the marketing? So for any clinical trial, it should be registered with clinicaltrials.gov. So if it is not on there, part of it may be that it just, it takes time to actually put all the information out there. But any clinical trial really should be registered with clinicaltrials.gov. A lot of the interventions have sort of difficult names. And so actually using clinicaltrials.gov with AlzForum is really nice. AlzForum gives a little bit more of a layman's kind of description of what that intervention is. And even on the bottom, there's a lot of really movers and shakers in the field that really comments on that. And it can be very helpful to have that bit of expert input kind of already within that AlzForum website. And then Monica actually has all of these websites, so don't worry about that. And then for dietary supplements, there is an NIH Office of Dietary Supplements, and you can really look at many, it's not going to be every single thing under the sun, but it's quite comprehensive what is in there. And we just recommend people to do their own research. Don't just believe the ads and just sort of, kind of passively like be given that information. You want to be kind of the director of your own decisions. And so you want to put in that time and energy to really know what you are putting in your own body, what you are spending your money on, and not simply just believing ads that are kind of being fed to you from a screen or from some other forum. So going into some of the questions that I thought might be helpful just to have a little picture with it. Will I notice a difference with anti-amyloid therapy? So again, it's really difficult for us to give you like that hard answer of like, yes, you will definitely see a difference, or no, you most definitely not. But there have been some papers using lots of different modeling systems to try and figure out like how much would we have to change the score that's of the scales that are used a lot in clinical trials to really say yes, like you will notice a difference. So most people who are familiar with Aricept, that was like from the 1990s, it was approved, we've had it for like 30 years. For the CDR, or Clinical Dementia Rating Scale, that's something that we use a lot in Alzheimer's clinical trials. There's like a sum of boxes of different cognitive and functional aspects. And basically, if you kind of change that by 0.5 points, sorry, that changes that separation of the CDR sum of boxes, that changes by about 0.5 points or half a point. But for someone who has mild cognitive impairment, mild dementia, or moderate to severe dementia, what this is saying is you need to change it by about 1 point. You need to slow down that increase of the score by about 1 point to notice a difference. Sorry. And then for mild dementia, you would need to change it by about 1.5. And then for moderate or severe, you would need to change it by about 2.3 points. So for donepezil, a lot of people will say they don't notice a difference. And I will say that for something like lecanemab, donanemab, it changes it by about this much. So when I counsel patients, I basically say, I would not expect a huge difference, but maybe you will notice a difference, and some people do, and it is still relatively newer. So who knows, like if there are some subgroups of people that will notice more of a difference than others. But we would say based on this kind of metric that we're thinking about to kind of quantify it, we would say don't expect that to be the case if you do decide to do this therapy. And then any trials for Parkinson's disease, absolutely. The Parkinson's Foundation is a really great resource, and they have this kind of little tab for the clinical trials. And then we were asked also about any trials for Down syndrome. Absolutely, there are definitely trials. This is actually coming out more as well now. It's just hit more of like the mainstream, and people are really thinking about this more than they used to. So Down syndrome is kind of a targeted population for some of these Alzheimer's clinical trials. And if you go to ACTC, which is the Alzheimer's Clinical Trials Consortium, they do have a dedicated area for Down syndrome. And there even is like a trial-ready cohort where people can sign up and be part of this registry where you can be contacted when there is a new trial for Down syndrome patients for various indicators, whether it's cognition in Alzheimer's or other kinds of endpoints. And then one of the last questions, my last slide, could you explain the importance of placebos in clinical trials, and how would you address this concern with patients and families? So within a clinical trial, really the gold standard is to have a randomized placebo-controlled double-blind trial. And what that means is that you randomly get assigned to a placebo or the intervention, and you don't know what you're on. And the investigator, if that's me, like I wouldn't, none of the study team would know, only the sponsor would know. And the whole purpose of that is to prevent bias, because we all kind of want the drug to work, and we all kind of even assume the drug will work better than the placebo. And then that can really kind of skew a lot of the other things that we see within the trial. And we just want to kind of maintain absolute neutrality. So a good trial and a researcher will maintain like an objective neutral stance and not be really kind of swayed one way or another, because we always have to be accepting that this might not really be helpful. And what we really want is to find the truth. We don't want to lead ourselves into a false conclusion, and then people are going to use that trial and other trials kind of stem off of that, and then it just becomes more and more and more false. And so we really have to make a an excellently designed clinical trial where everyone is neutral. We try to remove as much human bias as possible and kind of remove all our feelings. You know, we're scientists, so we just remove all the emotion from it. And that kind of leads us to something that is extremely cut and dry. This is really what it is. It doesn't matter if you like it, but at least we know what the answer is, and we can say that we tried to do everything that we could to really find what was true. And that is very important when we are trying to figure out more about this disease. And that's kind of the way I put it. But also in terms of the families, we don't have that much actually in terms of our standard of care. So even if you do get the placebo, there is actually a placebo effect. You're actually with a full team. So as long as the actual participation in the trial and the adverse events with that particular intervention are not really a big concern for you, it's basically, at least you get the chance, you know, at least there's a chance to get on the drug and you are still kind of being seen by another team, as opposed to if you don't do it, then you're just in the standard of care anyway. So that's kind of another way to think about it. Many of our clinical trials also have an open label extension where once the double blind period is over, there will be an option for everyone that was receiving placebo to then transfer over into the study drug, guaranteed. So that's another thing to really look at for clinical trials. And then there are some clinical trials where it's two arms of treatment. Maybe it's treatment A is one arm, and then the other side is treatment A plus B. So there doesn't always have to be a placebo either. So there's lots of differences in the design and the different phases, and that's going to determine sort of why one may not actually have a placebo group and why that might be okay in that particular scenario. So that's kind of, I just wanted to go over that just because those were the low-hanging fruit that I could incorporate into my talk. But
I wish everyone could have you as a doctor, is what I'm thinking here. But my dad did the young blood plasma at Stanford with Dr. Sharon Shaw. And I didn't know if he was getting placebo or not. But I will tell you, his mood completely changed because he felt like he had hope. And he loved going for his infusions because he felt like he was doing something. So I
exactly.
agree 100% with you that and they did placebo not, but then reversed it. So
Mhm.
6 months later, so you always got a little bit of the juice. But anyway, I thought it was great for the family, and he was so
Yeah.
excited to go and participate. So I agree with you on that. But real quickly, for the audience, about the Down syndrome, why Down syndrome for Alzheimer's research?
It's to me, right?
Yeah, can be to anybody, but you are the doctor, so.
Yeah. So Alzheimer's disease, it is a trisomy. It's a disease that's caused by an aneuploidy. So there's an extra chromosome 21. So trisomy 21. It's a pretty informative name. And the amyloid precursor protein is on chromosome 21. And so now you have, you know, a triplicate of that. And so what you get and what a lot of the studies show is that people with Down syndrome in their like even starting late in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they will have a lot of Alzheimer's pathological change in their brain. And that those were studies that were done already. It's kind of why we know at least amyloid, it is a contributor for Alzheimer's, even though, like I said, it's very complex. There's many different pathways to get to neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's. That was one of the pieces of evidence that was kind of adding a bean to the amyloid pile, that people with Down syndrome that have this extra copy of the amyloid precursor gene that gets translated into that amyloid protein will have a lot higher risk of Alzheimer's. But because the pathology is so different from someone who has late onset Alzheimer's or just kind of a sporadic Alzheimer's that happens, you won't get them incorporated in the same trial. And so what we're kind of doing is now having their own trials and sort of measuring it kind of more contained with the entire participant pool being people with Down syndrome as opposed to mixing it all, because then it does kind of dilute the power and the numbers. And then, like I said, it's a completely different kind of molecular pathology at play here because of that extra 21st chromosome. But yeah, people who have Down syndrome, they have a lot of much higher risk of developing cognitive decline relative to their baseline. And they do have more Alzheimer's pathology accumulating early on in their age. And of course, they also have many other kind of comorbid conditions
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
well, which can affect their cognition, their behavior, which is another reason we kind of need to see them all together, kind of in their own space, as opposed to bunching it with our regular late onset kind of group. Mhm.
Hmm. I love the comment you made about global clinical impression. I thought that was so good when you were talking a little bit about, the biomarkers and touched on it with supplements that you really need to see the big picture. And so thank you for saying that and sharing that with our audience.
Yes, absolutely.
Monica, Melissa?
So, Dr. Kim, I wanted to thank you for making it really important that people look up on NIH for research, but also for taking supplements, because we've seen a really high uptick with AI, and it's getting really good. And people are believing what they're seeing, especially on social media and websites. And so we need to go where the facts are, and not trust some of the things we're seeing. I completely agree with you that, go to those main sources that are actually doing the work, because not everything that we're seeing out there that's being advertised is accurate. So.
And,
Mhm.
I read once that, when we're thinking about some of these medications and supplements, like you're saying, I love that we're like brain boosting, like clearing, like makes you feel sharper. That lots of that was correlated to the same type of brain boost as you get for having a cup of coffee in the morning. And it's like, okay, so here I am. I'm tired. I'm sluggish. I have that first cup of caffeinated coffee. And I'm like, okay, now I'm good. So yes, am I experiencing a brain boost? Yes. But is this a pushing off Alzheimer's disease? No. And I think that that's the fine line that I really appreciate how you explain too, is like that there is that difference. Yes, we can all experience a brain boost. Go outside, go for a walk, you're going to experience a brain boost. And we have that 3 o'clock sluggish time of the day. You get up, maybe get the little snack. That's going to be your boost. And that's what lots of these, over-the-counter supplements and things like that do. Provide, but it's not preventing Alzheimer's disease.
Exactly.
I also heard
Yeah.
this great, uh, years and years ago, I heard a neurologist speak, and he said how Americans have the most expensive urine out of any
Yeah.
other country because
Yeah.
we take all these over the counter, but our bodies don't absorb it. So then
Yeah.
we just flush it right out, and there goes your 50 to $100 a month. Like it's just being flushed down the drain, literally. So
Mhm.
finding the much better ways of being able to incorporate these,
Yeah, these
boosts,
resources. Yeah.
yeah,
I,
make it good.
I think, and then I'll let Melissa go to a couple questions that are in here. But I'm going to encourage, and Kensington will put in the copy of the email about the Pointer study, which
Mm-hmm.
was, the Alzheimer's Association and NIH, where they have finally linked scientific evidence into lifestyle. First time
Yeah.
ever, scientific evidence. So when Dr. Kim was saying, maybe you should look at what you're eating. Maybe you should join a gym, go for a walk with a friend, get your necessary sleep. I encourage the audience to look at that. It's been linked to decrease your chances of dementia.
So,
Um,
Susan, one of my favorite studies that was done by AARP before COVID, um, was for social isolation. And so older adults have a higher rate if they're isolating to be at about a 60% for depression. And they said if that is continually happening, so continued isolation, it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, how it affects your body physically.
mhm.
And I think that really hits home for people.
That
And I
really
love to
hits.
share that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you shared that. But let's talk a little bit about there's some questions that are coming in about genetic risk, the APOE4
Mhm.
gene. Why do more women than men get dementia? Do you want to discuss a little bit about are there other genetic risks? Do women need to be more worried and why? Any thoughts on that big question I just threw at you? Any
Yeah.
of you could answer.
I think overall, yes, that is true. Women biologically, when we control for socioeconomic factors, level of education, and the age, we are at a higher risk than men. And then, there's like cardiovascular things that where men are more at risk. And so there is going to be a little bit of like a sex effect for certain diseases. Exactly what is contributing to that for Alzheimer's is not still clear. People are looking at hormones, people are looking at the different amount of effect of the ApoE allele, specifically the E4. And we do know that background genetics, even different ethno-racial groups, will have different amounts of risk conferred by the E4 allele. In general, when I counsel, I don't necessarily split it between male and female. It's already kind of a complicated kind of a discussion. So I just say, if you have one E4 allele that about doubles, 2 to 3 times your risk, and then if you have two, that can increase your risk by about tenfold. That's actually going to be a little bit wrong when you look at very specific groups, but it's also just to keep it a little bit easier when we explain it. It's sort of like if you explain too much detail, it actually becomes less useful of an explanation. But yes, there are some differences about how much risk the E4 allele will confer in men versus women, as well as depending on your background, because the context of our genes are different for various ethno-racial backgrounds as well.
Dr. Kim, so there's a question, this one, and I wanted to make a comment, but then I also want, your thought too about it. So, anonymous attendee asked a question about, talk about the A4 allele, da 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 da. And there's two parts of this statement that, or one thing that's saying how that they take 5 milligram of lithium orotate daily. And again, I know that was something that came out recently, talking about lithium. I think an important piece for all of us as a consumer when we are reading when we are reading reports of studies is, and I heard someone speak just last week, doctor speak about health and wellness, and he said, in mice, we have cured cancer and we have cured lots of diseases. But guess what? We are not mice.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a really big piece. So I know like the lithium study, the report of it that I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but saying that this was not tested in humans, it was tested in mice. And so again, we aren't mice. And so there's going to be a big difference in terms of the success of some of these medications or things like this from
Mm-hmm.
a mouse model study translating over to a human study.
Yes.
Mm.
Absolutely. If something says preclinical, that means it's animals or a dish.
Mhm.
Preclinical means it's not in human. And so, yeah, lithium is found in trace amounts. It's an element, and it's found in trace amounts in food and water. And the Harvard study that's being referred to was that there's like endogenous amounts of lithium. It kind of helps support the nervous system. And so maybe microdosing with lithium, can be helpful. So what I will say is there were a couple of pilot trials. There was a systematic review. People do take lithium, bipolar people, so it's something that is used in psychiatry. It's a mood stabilizer. It really changes some lives, truly, for people who have severe bipolar disorder. And so there were some epidemiological studies just looking at when there was a certain amount of like lithium in like the drinking water, there seemed to be like a lower prevalence of Alzheimer's, or people who had bipolar disorder. A lot of psychiatric illnesses that are pretty significant will actually increase your dementia risk. And so bipolar disorder is one of those. And they were looking at people who were on lithium like for longer seem to have lower like rates of diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So these were some of the initial observations that led to the study. But there was a study where they were looking at about 80 participants, and they were looking at multiple measures of cognitive performance, like the gray matter and like other cortical volume, white matter integrity. And it did not, at least at that number, 80 is not really powered enough to really see all of the effect. But and within that study, none of the primary endpoints were met. But there is some suggestion. There's like maybe some trends here and there. So what I would say, it's kind of like the supplement. We just don't have enough data to then say, yes, everyone should go out and get some lithium. And then when that study came out, I mean, Harvard, it's looking really good. It's so promising. And then you can just package it and sell it. So there's really a low bar for people to just kind of manufacture it and sell it. And then it's sort of a lot of people will do it just in case. It's like, well, couldn't hurt, like just in case, might as well. But then again, when we start to just do a lot of things without a lot of evidence, it can start to really accumulate to be a lot of things that we're doing without much evidence. And so we want to make sure that everything that we're doing, we're going to get some bang for our buck because we only have so much time and resources and energy. So we don't want this like to balloon into like a bunch of things that are not fully grounded and fully hashed out.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Kim, there's a question. Someone who's been on Leqembia and now they're on their maintenance infusions. How long can someone be on maintenance infusions?
I mean, according to ASI, they should be on it forever. But in general, I do think, so one thing that has changed is it's now subcutaneous. So the maintenance therapy can be given as an injectable. It's called iClick. So you don't have to go in for the infusions anymore. That's a big deal. That being said, and overall the ARIA, the amyloid-related imaging abnormalities, the biggest kind of side effects, they're the most at risk in the first 6 months of the therapy. That was when it was seen like the most. But still, every medication sort of will have its risks. And then as we age, there are other things besides Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative disease that can happen. And so technically, yes, you can be on lecanemab indefinitely. But also, you do not have to be on lecanemab indefinitely because, like I said, maybe there's going to be a point where you have AFib or you have a DVT and you need to be on anticoagulation. God forbid you have a stroke, and we use thrombolytic, medications for that. And that's being on this medication also is going to increase, your risk for that. So it's always kind of risk benefit ratio. And some of these are hypothetical, things that may come in the future or may not. Donanemab, interestingly enough, they said not to continue it once the amyloid is cleared, and yet it's the same target. So there are definitely some nuanced differences. Lilly is the company that made donanemab. Eisai is the company that made lecanemab. And so they have kind of their own data and they have their own recommendations that stem from kind of the data that they have. And so those are the current recommendations. So for lecanemab, they are kind of recommending it to be indefinitely, but please take that with a grain of salt and do consider your own other kind of comorbid conditions and other risks and things that can happen as we age.
The good news is if you're on these, right, you're being monitored by a physician. And so you don't have to make these decisions on your own. You have a team behind you. So
Yes, ask
that's nice.
questions, lots and lots of questions.
So the last question that we're going to end with, is there any evidence showing heavy marijuana use can cause Alzheimer's?
So let me see. What I will say is that marijuana and the smoke and things like that, it is known to be vasoactive. It's not completely harmless. And I think yeah, that's one of the things. What am I trying to say? So for certain like things like vaping and things like marijuana, like a lot of people weren't doing it. It was like illegal in many states and people were like, look at all these benefits. We should really like just pan it out to everyone. And then finally, when a lot of people are on, just heavy marijuana use and now people are vaping, now we're actually seeing it's kind of like the old adage, time will tell. Time will tell. Don't jump to conclusions. We don't know what we don't know. And so I don't think marijuana is good for the brain. That is what I will say, just kind of not backed by specific PubMed ID, kind of studies. We do know that there can be some damage to the vasculature. And in general, when someone is high, you're probably not going to do amazingly on like a test. Your reaction time is not going to be faster because you are high. So like it's kind of like alcohol. Maybe it can take some of the edge off if you're really anxious, you're really nervous. But if you're drunk, that's not really good for the brain. You're actually going to perform worse. And I think it's kind of the same with marijuana. So, if you need something a little bit, I just say moderation, just like the everything in moderation.
Yeah.
And then don't take things to the extreme where like marijuana is just like a panacea for everything and like it's not dangerous at all. Look at this, it's great. And now we're actually seeing like, no, actually it isn't. And also vaping, it is not any safer than nicotine cigarettes. So, we just want to be careful about thinking we know everything, and then later on, being proven wrong, as is, the case many times in the medical field. Specifically, specifically, 100 years ago, we were making very, very different recommendations for diseases than we are now, and maybe in 100 years, we will think some of the things that we're doing now are silly. So we just never know, and we just have to, yeah,
Well,
use our common sense and good judgment.
and yeah, I was thinking about the US Pointer study that is linking lifestyle to clinical evidence that it helps reduce dementia. I don't think you're going to do the right things in the Pointer study if you're heavily using marijuana. I will just end with that. That
Yes, yes,
you're
it's all the
probably not
system.
going out,
All
going for a walk with a friend. You might be isolating yourself a little bit. I don't know, but sounds like it's probably not a good idea, although I'm not a doctor. Anyway, thank you, Dr. Kim, so much. Thank you again to my dear friends, Monica and Melissa, and thank you to the audience for joining us. And we're super excited about this series for you and look forward to our next one. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bye.
Have
everyone.
a great evening and a good afternoon.